Hello and welcome to EdPsych for Kids. I'm Hannah Morris, an educational psychologist. I work with children, families and schools to help with understanding a child's learning, behaviour and development. Please feel free to browse my website where you'll find lots of information about the assessment, training and consultancy services I offer. And there's an accessibility button should you find this helpful. I'm passionate about enabling children to thrive in education and empowering adults in knowing how to support children with special educational needs and disabilities. It can be confusing and overwhelming knowing where to start and how to help a child when they have difficulties at school. These might be related to learning, friendships, concentration, motor skills, communicating, or emotional needs. Here at EdPsych for Kids, you'll find the answers to many of your questions. Whether you're looking for an assessment to better understand your child, would like training in how to support a child at home or school, or you're seeking advice for product development, I'd be pleased to hear from you. Hello everybody, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I am really looking forward to this evening's talk. I've had a sneak peek at Natasha's slides and it all looks really interesting and really useful tips coming your way. Before we start, if you could just pop a thumbs up in the comments to let me know that you can hear me okay, I can check everything's running smoothly. My name is Hannah Morris. I'm an educational psychologist at EdPsych for Kids, and I'm thrilled that this evening I'm going to be joined by Natasha Hickling, ADHD coach at Indigo Hub, and she's going to be talking about teenagers with ADHD and risk-taking behaviours. So I'm just going to pop Natasha on with us now. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us, where are you joining us from this evening?
I'm joining you from, I'd like to say sunny, but it's been very cold today. So I'm joining you from the very, very cold Yorkshire.
Yorkshire, wonderful. I'm the other end. I'm in Hertfordshire. So I know that we've got people who have signed up from all over the UK, which is great, and lots of people keen to get some advice and learn a bit more, I think, and get some insight and understanding into supporting teenagers with ADHD and sometimes some of the things that they struggle with. So I know that you're joining us from Yorkshire, but I know that you're pretty well travelled, from being a Senko in Malaysia to working in all different parts of the UK. Tell us a little bit sort of about your work and your experience and the sorts of things that you do as an ADHD coach.
Hi everyone, I'm Natasha Hickling, and I would love to say that this is going to go plain smooth, but we're live, so if you can't hear us, please let us know in the chat and things like that, because we're all human, right? So, but we will do our best to keep going. If I look down, it's just because I'm looking at notes, because I have ADHD myself. And if you see me moving a lot, that's just because that's part of who I am. I'm here fully, authentically as Natasha. So I'll tell you a bit about myself. I'm Natasha. I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 27, so 3 years ago. And when I was 21, I was diagnosed with anxiety, OCD, and also dyslexia and dyspraxia. So I am neurodiverse myself, and that's what I've always done. I was a primary school teacher for many years, and then I became I couldn't do it in the UK, so I left the UK for the last 6 years, and I've been teaching around the world in Malaysia, in China, and in Australia. I had to think then. And when I was diagnosed with ADHD, I decided that I really wanted to invest time in children with special educational needs, because guess what? I am someone that has special educational needs, and I always found it really easy to get on with children that have special education, because I can see a lot of myself in them. I know how to break things down, because that's what I needed as a child, even though I just didn't know about it. So I devoted the last kind of 4 years to really helping children with special needs. And I was a Senko in Malaysia, where I ran my own I was the head of inclusion in an international school. And after going through ADHD life coaching myself as an adult, I decided that for me, that was the most help that I could get. In a school, I could only go so far. I wanted to help parents, I wanted to help children, I wanted to help school, but I wanted to help everybody, because if we do something at school, then they go home and it might not be done. So it's really trying to get that holistic, approach so that child can get the best help and be who they are. And that's what I do now. I run the past 6 months. I've been running my Indigo Hub business. I did run a bit time in Malaysia. And now I'm back in the UK. I've only been back here 2 months. It's very cold. That's why I mentioned the cold. Where I work with teenagers, children, parents, so they're additional other, and young adults under 30, where I help them with ADHD to help really, really understand who they are, get the ownership that they need to move forward despite their challenges by using their strengths and who they are. Because guess what? If your children have ADHD, they are incredible.
Oh, Natasha, the first little technical hitch there that you did say we might have it. You just froze for a moment, but I think we got the gist. We think we got the gist. You were telling us about how amazing our children with ADHD are, and you're so right. I think it's really interesting. You touched on a really important point there about children presenting differently in different situations and settings, and certainly a lot of the families I work with, is quite a common story, isn't it? That children will kind of offload and explode at home, and I think sometimes it can be quite hidden, the level of stress it can place on parents and the family who are desperately trying to help their children, but really perhaps struggling to know what to do and where to go and what's right, what's wrong. So I think it's wonderful that we can't have enough coaches, Natasha, like yourself. So I think tonight's going to be really, really useful for the parents watching us this evening. Just to let everybody know before we start that this recording and Natasha's slides will be available afterwards, and they'll be available. You can either contact Natasha or they'll be on the EdSite for Kids social media. So I'll just pop that up there for you now. So this is Natasha's website, and then the EdSite for Kids social media is at EdSite for Kids. I'll pop that up in a minute. So I'm going to go in a moment, and Natasha, you're going to start off, I think, by telling us some really key information that's useful for parents to know and to help understand teenagers with ADHD. So yeah, really looking forward to it. Enjoy, everybody.
So just check everyone can hear me. I hope so. Sorry about that technical difficulty. That's what happens, right? When we're all working from home, it does happen, right? It's part of being human. So I just want to end and just say thank you so much to everyone for coming. I've been an ADHD life coach for the past kind of 8 months, and I have worked with children and everyone with ADHD because I have it myself. And I really want you to leave with something today. And that's what I'm going to try and give you. I would love to say that I'm going to give you loads and loads and loads of neuroscience and stuff like that. But I don't really feel that that's all that's always needed. We can go on the internet for that. I really want to give you some understanding, some personal experiences, and something to leave with to go and try. And that's what I really try and do. I can give you the neuroscience and I'm going to dip your toes in, but I don't really think that that's the practical thing that we need here. And I want you to be able to leave with something. If you're a parent, if you're a professional, I want you to leave and have something to go away with. So let's go. Oh, okay. Or is another technical difficulty? There we go. So as you know, I'm an ADHD life coach at Indigo Hub, just started my business. And so that's just there. If you want to contact with me after the webinar, I'm always happy to answer any questions that you may have. And if I can't help you, then I'll point you in the right direction. Okay, do what I can, because at the end of the day, we're always crying out for help and support, and I will do my best to try and do that for you. Okay, so teenagers. Okay, that's what we're here. ADHD, teenagers, risk taking. So I'm going to start with the teenagers. Okay, being a teenager, you know, there's a lot that comes with that. Here's just a few. Social pressures. Risky behaviors, that's why we're here. Independence, trying to leave school, trying to figure out what independence you need. But you still need your parents, but you don't need your parents. Might not want to have your parents involved. You want to be independent, but you're not quite an adult yet. You're still living under your parents' roof. You're not really knowing what's going on. Then the future's looming. Am I going to go to college? What am I going to do after my A-levels? Wait a minute, I've got to pick GCSEs. Then what happens after university? What goes next? There's a lot of pressure. Then there's puberty, okay? Developmental problems and developmental things, right? They're out of our control. Relationships, starting relationships, friendships, here, there, and everywhere. Relationships with parents change. Relationships with siblings change. Relationships with teachers change. Academics, okay? You've got one thing to another to another. You've got, if you're doing GCSEs to A-levels, there's so many subjects. And the big one that I like to think of is self-discovery. This is the time where you learn a lot about yourself, and you might not know it, but you kind of really come into the essence of who you are. These are just a few, and there's lots more. So it's kind of a lot to deal with. And that means if there's a lot for your teenager to deal with, there's a lot for you as parents to deal with. Okay? I'm not going to go anymore. You know, you've probably got teenagers yourself. Then we bring the ADHD key in here. So what is ADHD? And I'm not going to go into the whole definition of exactly what ADHD is. I'm just going to give you a bit of a nugget, okay? ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, okay? I don't see it as a deficit, and a lot of other people don't see it as a deficit. But that's what it is called, right? It's a neurodevelopmental condition, and it presents itself very different to everybody. Every person with ADHD is very different. Every person's challenges are very different. Every person's condition looks very differently. However, to the UK board, there are 3 different presentations, or as some people still like to call it, subtypes. They are hyperactivity and impulsivity. So the hyperactivity, and that can be physical or cognitive in the mind, or physical. Then there's inattentive, which is more of that distractibility, that attention from one thing to another, the daydreamer, you know, very in your own head, lots of things there. And then there's combined presentation, which is when there is presentations of both. This is the most common presentation, is combined. Then obviously we've got different severities, right? We've got mild, moderate, severe. So they are the presentations. However, not one person with hyperactivity, impulsivity, or inattentive is ever the same. So with ADHD, there comes many, many challenges. There also becomes many, many strengths that we don't think about. So someone with Ned Hallowell says that creativity is impulsivity gone right. Okay? Impulsivity brings many, many, many creative things. It's really innovative. We're very interesting, humorous people. Okay, well, I like to think that we are anyway. The hyperactive. We've got hyperactive minds. We have loads and loads of ideas. We're curious. We're full of life, zest, energy, right? Inattentive daydreamer usually means we're very, very sensitive people. We're very empathetic, compassionate. So with every challenge becomes a strength as well, and very, very unique strengths. Okay. But with ADHD, so what causes ADHD? Well, I would love to tell you that there's a definite answer here. There are many things. There are many things in the press right now about whether is it biological, whether it's hereditary, or whether it's environmental. Well, the answer is I'm not going to be able to tell you if it's one or the other. Okay. There are tests that say it's biological, but there are some things that say it's environmental. It could be a bit of both. But we do know that it's a neurochemical called dopamine in our brain, a neurotransmitter, and it's basically an unbalance of this. Dopamine is what we like as results. And so it's our reward system. So when we do something right, we get a shot of dopamine. It's like when you do something right at school, you might get, a star. It gives you a dopamine boost, which stimulates your brain. People with ADHD have an imbalance of dopamine. which means that a reward system doesn't work the same as everybody else's. It is not less, it is different. And that's why I say people with ADHD have a very unique brain wiring that is very, very different. And today I want to give you a bit of understanding of how that works to be able to work with your teen. Coexisting conditions. A lot with ADHD comes other conditions, whether that's autism, whether that's a learning disorder, whether that's a physical disorder, and whether that's a mental health. It usually doesn't come on its own, which then comes with a whole lot of other more challenges and other more stresses for the person with ADHD and yourself. Today, we're only going to touch on ADHD, but I just wanted to mention that because sometimes when there's that other part, it's a lot different. Then there's life impacts of having ADHD. You have to tell your boss, the schools. There's a lot of stuff that comes with it. And then there's educating yourself and then managing your ADHD that comes part and parcel with that. So when we have teens, we have ADHD. That's a lot. All those things with the academics, the social pressures, all these things. And then we've got ADHD challenges, trying to understand your brain thinks differently. That's a lot to handle. But I want to say this, and I'm a big believer in this, that ADHD does not just affect the teen that we're talking about here. It does not just affect your teens. It affects you and your whole family. Yeah, they're the one that has it, but you're the one that has to learn about it, pick up the pieces, and understand them and work with them. And that's why I'm a big believer of working with parents, working with individuals, because it does not just affect you. It affects the sibling, the whole household, the school, all these different things. And I want to help you learn to work with your teen rather than probably what it feels like against. Because I know from my experience, I worked against mine. And I don't want that for you. So, risky behaviors. That's what we're here for, right? We can go into so many different aspects of ADHD. We're going to narrow into teens and ADHD and risky behaviors, which is one of the key things when it comes to teens and ADHD. So what do I mean by risky behaviors? So these are just simply just a few risky behaviors. So you've got impulse spending, overspending, emotions high, and emotional regulation, which can cause a lot of reactivity, fights, arguing, conflicts, trouble maintaining friends, real social problems, social challenges, romantic relationships, going into one, coming out of one, trying someone else, speeding and dangerous driving. Now that's a big one. Substance abuse, risky sexual behaviors, and high adrenaline activities. And these are quite self-explanatory, right? I'm not going to go into these. You know that when it comes to ADHD, people with ADHD are more prone to risky behaviors because of the ADHD. And we're going to go into that, okay? So we're going to go into what causes these. What is it about ADHD that can have an impact on risky behaviors? And really, how does ADHD influence this? Risky behaviors can increase dopamine levels, which may be the part of a reason some individuals with ADHD are drawn to them. Every single teen is drawn to risky behaviors. I'm not going to say it and say only people with ADHD are drawn to risky behaviors. However, when you have ADHD, it's an extreme. It's in more intensity, which means because risky behaviors can increase dopamine levels and people with ADHD have an imbalance of dopamine, it means people with ADHD are more drawn to them. And that is proven. And I'm going to go more into that, okay? By showing you a car. The reason why I do this is because it can be quite hard and overwhelming to understand the ADHD brain. I could go into neuroscience, but that's not going to give you anything. It might give you a bit of understanding. It might give you a headache. You might not remember it. So I would like to give you practical things to help you understand. So what exactly is going on when it comes to ADHD, the brain, and risky behaviors? I like to think of it as a car, okay? These are the ingredients of stimulation. What I mean by stimulation is how the brain is stimulated, what makes the brain stimulated, how it's stimulated, why it's stimulated, okay? And how that impacts the brain's functions, okay? So the ADHD brain, right? It's a car. Imagine the car is your teen's ADHD brain. And we've got 5 components here. We've got the fuel, which is the interest. We've got the intention, which is the sat nav, or the way it's going. We've got the ignition, which is the key. We've got the inhibition, which is the brakes. And we've got the intuition, which is the driver. You're probably thinking, what? What's she going about? Car? ADHD brain? I'm going to tell you one thing. ADHD is not, 100% not, a deficit of attention. It says it in its name. People with ADHD have abundance of attention. And that's quoted by Ned Hallowell and Russell Barkley, who are 2 of the pioneers in ADHD in America. It's an abundance of attention. It is so much attention when there's the key ingredients of interest. As you might know, when someone with ADHD is so interested, they can focus for about, I don't even know how long. They could stop eating, they can stop being aware. They've got no breaks because they're so invested. When the interest and fuel is not there, it's not going to work. Like a car. When you pump a car with fuel, it's going to go for hours. If there's no fuel, it's not going to move. It's not going to turn on. It's not going to go anywhere. There's going to be no driver. There's going to be no point in braking. And the ADHD brain is exactly the same. It is, if anything, a deficit of interest rather than a deficit of attention. So when we think about that, we think about interest. Think of a packet of crisps, right? Your teen thinks, wow, look at that packet of crisps. And they stare at it. Oh, look at that. That could be really tasty. They're fueling their brain. The brain's hooked. The stimulation is hooked. When you get the sat nav, their intention is to go and get that packet of crisps. So they walk over and they grab the crisps, which is the intention, the direction that they're going. Then this turns them. It ignites them. This is where the dopamine comes in. Here, dopamine boost. They eat the crisp, dopamine boost. I mean, you get a dopamine boost from looking at it, but the reward is when you turn the car on, right? When you turn the car on, it's going to move. That's when the reward comes in. Dopamine goes ding, ding, ding. Okay? But wait a minute. They don't put the brakes on, which is the inhibition, to go, do I really need that crisps? Do I really want those crisps? Is that really the best thing for me? No. They're just thinking, oh, these crisps. And then guess what happens after time comes on? They've had 1 packet of crisps. Then the next day they see another crisps. Oh, the interest there. They remember what it's like from last time. So then they go for the crisps. They eat the crisps, the dopamine. Then it becomes autopilot, which is your intuition. After a while, those behaviors become automatic. Crisps. I remember that from last time. Walk to the crisp, eat the crisp. Yay! Autopilot. Same with a car. You fuel it, you go somewhere, you have to start the car to move it. Sometimes it's hard and you have to put an emergency stop on. But that rarely happens. And you just drive after time after time after time. You drive. It's the same with the ADHD brain. Now with risky behaviors. They see the risky behavior. It interests them. Oh, everybody else is doing it. Then their brain goes, okay. They go there. But because they've not got that dopamine, they've got that imbalance, we can't just go, we'll go somewhere else. Remember that break key? You go, okay, let's go. You go in the direction, and then, boom, the risky behavior is done. We get that dopamine boost. We've not put the brakes on because we've not stopped to think. After a while, that behavior becomes autopilot because we remember that last time it gave us that dopamine boost. So we want to do it again and again and again and again. The interest starts, we go, we do the risky behavior, it becomes autopilot. Because there isn't that dopamine balance in the brain, we don't put the brakes on to stop. We just go 1, 2, 3, autopilot, and we do it again. When parents say, wait a minute, what are you doing? Where are you going? That's putting the brakes on. But we don't want that. We want this. Yes, dopamine, turn the car on. This is what we want. We want the reward for doing it. We don't know any different. Our brains are functioned this way. We have the interest, we go with it, we get the reward, and it becomes autopilot and a habit after a while. Most brains, when you don't have ADHD, they get the interest, but then people put the brakes on. They think about what's going to happen next. They think about, if I take that cigarette, what will my mum say? What will everybody else say? They think about what's going to happen next. People with ADHD don't see that. They see, yay, cigarette, yes, go. They don't think about what's going to happen next because of this key, the inhibition. We don't have the break because it's so much attention, so much interest that it's hard to put that on when you've got that imbalance of dopamine because it's reward after reward after reward. And reward's good. We need rewards. But if that fuel, that interest is not serving as well, and it's not serving as well, and it's not to our benefit, then this becomes risky, negative, and has a real long-term cost for us and for our parents. But we don't see that. And that is the key here. And I'm going to keep going on. We don't see it. It is not our fault. And it doesn't mean that that's an excuse and we can take responsibility for it. But it's not our fault that our brain gets stimulated very different to everybody else's. Everybody else, probably after the fuel, stops and thinks, puts the brakes on. We don't. Why? And this break comes here very easily. People with ADHD perceive the benefits of the behavior, but not the cost. We see, yay, packet of crisps, had a cigarette, woohoo. We don't see what's going to happen after. Wait a minute, if I smoke for the rest of my life, this is going to happen. If I do jump off a building, this is going to happen. If this risk behavior, this is what's going to happen. We see short-term benefit and we do not see the long-term cost. Our parents see it. Everybody else probably sees it, but we don't. And that's proven that people with ADHD are more prone to risky behavior because of the dopamine. Oh, there we go. Because of the dopamine, because it's increased, because it's decreased, we are drawn to them because we don't have the break. That's called prospective memory. We're now or never. We don't see what's in front of us. We see now. That's why when you tell our team with ADHD, if you do this, you're going to be grounded in 2 weeks. They're not going to 2 weeks is nothing. It's now or never. And that's because this is very different. But when you've got risky behaviors, you're igniting your brain with very, very, very toxic and not healthy things. But we don't see it. So what do we do there? And I'm going to tell you. However, I want you to understand that this is not their fault. That doesn't mean they can't take responsibility for this, but their brain is different. My brain is very different to what most people say are. And it's understanding that what interests them is going to make them go, that's going to give them the dopamine, that's going to make it happen again and again and again, because it usually does, unless something forces the brakes. And that's what we're going to look at today. How can we as parents help with that break?
Natasha, hey. How are you doing? This is brilliant. I'm loving this analogy so much. I love how you've broken it down and really helped to sort of understand with all that, without that technical jargon, really what's going on inside the ADHD brain. And I know you're going to give us some brilliant tips in a moment. I'm just popping on because I know there's a few people who have joined us since we started. So I just wanted to just remind everyone that you can ask questions in the comments. If you've got any questions, then we will try and answer them at the end. I mean, it's just been so helpful, I think, to reflect and be reminded that ADHD is not just about the challenges, but also the strengths. And it's really sort of been great to sort of put that in perspective and not lose sight of that. But I also love the way you're very real and you're recognizing that actually it can be really, really challenging as parents having children with ADHD and particularly when we're so worried about their behaviors. And yeah, I think I'm really looking forward to hearing the next part on exactly what do we do, how do we help. But just for those that have just joined us recently, could you just remind us about your coaching services and just sort of the people that you work with, like is it just whether it's adults, kids? I think that would be helpful just before we move on.
So hi, if anyone's just joined us, I'm Natasha. I'm an ADHD life coach. And I mean, I'm qualified to teach, to coach anyone. However, my speciality is with children, adolescents, young adults, and their significant other, whether that's parents or a couple.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add, just in case anybody here does work in education, or if you are also thinking about how you might be able to get some more support at school, then if you're looking for training within an education setting, or maybe your school says to you, oh, do you know, where can I get more information about how to help your child with ADHD? Then there are on my website, EdPsych for Kids, I have an online training for schools on ADHD and supporting children with ADHD at school. So you can go to my website and click on the courses and training to access that course. That is for education practitioners, if anybody's interested in that. And then obviously if you're looking for support at home, then a coach such as Natasha is definitely a good place to start, someone who can help you. So yeah, thanks for joining us, those that have come on now. This will be available to watch afterwards, so if you've just joined us, you can catch up afterwards. The recording will be available. If you pop #replay, then we'll know if people are watching at a later date, and then if there's any more questions, we can reply in the comments and things. But for now, I think everyone's probably really keen to hear the next part, the crucial part. Natasha, what are we going to do? How are we going to help our kids if we're worried that they're showing some risk-taking behaviours?
Thanks, Hannah. And just as always with ADHD, I've just had a spark of inspiration from what you were saying. And I just want to mention that when you learn this, right, and when your adolescents learn this, I actually teach this to my clients, right? When you learn how your brain works, you can learn to work with it rather than against it. When teens are doing risky behaviors, they're working against it. It's not serving them well. But when people have ADHD and they have that abundance of interest, right, that deficit, when they're interested in something that works for them, whether it's music, something they're doing, a career, whether it's school, whether it's friends, and they've got that interest there, they've got that intention, they go in there, they can ignite themselves to do it again. And it can be a big plus, but it can be a big challenge. And that's the thing with ADHD. It's a big challenge, but also a big strength. And that's the paradox of ADHD, because it is a strength. Because when you've got all this attention, that abundance of attention, and you're interested, you're hooked, you're there, it ignites you, your dopamine goes ding, 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 becomes autopilot. You can do it over and over again. But this break thing is very key. Is it serving you well? People with ADHD have so much stimulation. They need so much stimulation that when they're interested, they can go even further than most people because they've got that stimulation. However, it's when it's serving you not in the best way. And that's what risky behavior is. And because we don't have that break of what the risks are, we need help. I know we need help because I needed help. So I have ADHD. I have other conditions as well. And when I was a teen, I needed help. And peer pressure, I masked. Life was really difficult. It was really, really difficult. And no one seemed to understand. I was so different to everybody else. So different. And my interest was drama. Loved musical. I loved drama. And I threw into that. Then it ignited me and things like that. However, before that, life was so hard. The effort key here. And life is so difficult and so much. It's so much more effort because the breaks are so much more effort. It's so much harder to put that interest into something positive when you don't have that. Because risky behaviors sometimes can have more dopamine than others. And it takes a lot of effort to change this. Especially if your teen has got that autopilot. It takes so much effort. So I had to escape as a teen. And how I escaped was with risky behaviors. But mine was a bit older. Mine was more like 18 to 21. And I did risky behaviors, and I'm not ashamed to say that. But it's because I didn't understand my own brain. My family didn't understand my own brain, and that's not their fault. We just didn't have the keys. And today I want to try and give you some keys. And that's why I've given you this rather than science. Because it is science. It's what's going on. But it's more practical. That kids, adolescents, and everyone can understand without all the jargon. Once we learn how to understand and fuel our brains in the right way, we then go in the right direction. Which means we get the right ignition that serves us well. When we have that, we can learn to put on the brakes to notice if it is. Once we've got that and we know we can do it, it becomes autopilot because we know that we can do it and we know that we can have the right interest. We can go in the right direction. We can have this better rewards than risky behaviors. And we've learned to put the brakes on and it becomes autopilot. And it took me till being an adult to get that. And that's why I work with teens and adolescents, because I don't want teens and adolescents to go what I went through and to hide, escape, because it's so hard. I want them to have a better chance. And I just want you to know that I know sometimes now it can seem like there's no way forward. Trust me, there is. It's just learning, understanding, and working with them. Right. So what can we do as parents? Or what can we do as professionals, right? I would love to give you a magical one and say, right, every individual is so easy. This is the keys to do it. Go try it and it works. It's not that easy, unfortunately. Every individual with ADHD is so different. The interest is very different. The intention, the brains are very easy. They're similar, all right, how it works. But then finding that interest and all that, it's very hard. So I'm going to give you some practical tips. Number 1 is being a detective. It can be very hard as an adult when you see the people that you love doing things that you might have done yourself, you've seen, or you know what's going to happen, to jump to conclusions or assumptions. I'm going to give you a coaching hat. Our number 1 thing as a coach is to treat everybody as natural, creative, resourceful, and whole in a non-judgmental environment. I'm not allowed to go in with an agenda, go to an assumptions. I invite you to do the same. Take a step back. What is going on? Facts. What are their emotions? What are their actions? What are their behaviors? Facts, evidence. What is going on? What is going on? Are they going out at night? What are you noticing with their emotions? How are they changing? How are they speaking to you? The facts. And it can be hard when we put emotions, our own emotions, into it. Trust me, I know. When we put our own emotions into it, it can be hard to take that step back. But when you take that step back, I call it being a non-judgmental observer. When we observe as though we're not related to them, we have no emotional attachment, we no conclusion, and just look at the facts and what we see. And the number 1 thing I say here is emotions. You can tell a lot by children's ADHD emotions. Number 2, dig deeper. What you see is very different to what's going on. Behavior is the external factor of what's going on inside. You may see the coming home late, drunk, all these different risky things. But that is the after effect. What is the impact? So once you've got that detective key and you've seen what's going on, you've noticed what their behavior is, what their emotions, what their actions are. That's above the iceberg here. Then I want you to dig a bit deeper. What is that telling you? Okay, so they're staying out at late. They come back really sad. They're really emotional. What's that telling you? This is how we crack that autopilot, right? We need to find the cause of what's going on. The fuel. That fuel or the interest, we need to know why that's happening. What's going on? I mean, I'll give you a piece today, right? About kind of how the brain is stimulated. But what is the interest here? What is fueling them? And why are they looking for that? Or why are they feeling that way rather than another way? What people don't see, what is going on? Again, not thinking in the parent's eyes, thinking step back. What are these telling you further? What could be the cause? Because when you find the cause and the internal factor, it's a lot easier to change the external factor. A bit like what I said here with the car. Once you understand that it's stimulation, then you can learn how to change it. Once you understand what's going on, you can then learn how to change it and create those better patterns and those patterns that serve them rather than the risky ones. 3, the approach. Then when you've got all this information, you've took a step back, you've looked at what's going on, you've dug deeper, what are they telling you? What are these behaviors showing? Or what do you assume they're showing? What is the cause of this? Is it their ADHD? Is it something else? Is it other people? If it's ADHD, I've given you some factors. If it's other things, then that may be something else, external help. But what is the cause? Then how then do you approach them with all this? And this is quite difficult when it comes to teens, right? This is when the emotions come out, regulation, when emotions are high, when the confrontation comes out. This is what happens. And this is what I do. And this is what a lot of my parents do. I, we, them. There are 3 steps. A lot of parents, it's I. I think you should do this. I think. And I agree, right? We know what's best sometimes. Sometimes we may not. However, usually when someone with ADHD hears I, their brain goes, oh, it's not what they want. It might, our brain just turns off. Or we hear, I want you to do this. I don't want to do this. And then it explodes. People with ADHD don't like authority. And that is just very simple. It comes from the dopamine. It comes from the effort that they might have to do. It comes from trying to do things everybody's way because our brain works differently. That's why I like the we. We is supportive, collaborative. I is direct and your own agenda. We is together, supportive, and you and them together. I turns into we, turns into them. We. I've noticed that you've been coming home late at night. How could we work together to help this? I've noticed you've been a bit sad. How can we do this? And then when the we turns into them take ownership, empowers them. So it's the steps. I like to start, sometimes you have to start with I. I've noticed this. But then when you've said what you notice, how can we do this? But then they've got to do it because then you become the supporter that turns into them. So rather than, I think just I've noticed this. Using the detective, digging deeper. How can we help? What can we do together to help with this? That turns into, okay, we're going to do this. We do it for a while. Now you. Because that's what we want. We want kids to have that independence. We want them to empower. But then sometimes, especially with ADHD, they do need that help. And when I find these 3 steps, I, we, them. Or sometimes just we, them. I've noticed this, that coming from that non-judgmental observer, what you've noticed from the first 2 steps, how can we work together? And then it's up to them to do that and take that ownership. Because at the end of the day, they have to try. They've got these cards. That's why I always say, I have cards. These are the deck of cards I've got. I've got ADHD, I've got this. Now I can work with it. We do need help. But it has to be on our and the parents' terms, not just the parent, not just ourselves as a teenager. It needs to be on a we basis, and then they have to take ownership of that. And then some extras, okay? When you're working with teens, these are just extras to think about. Managing your own emotions. That can be really hard, and I don't mean to be patronizing, but it is. When we come into these, we have to be neutral. And it's really, really difficult. I know it's so frustrating sometimes with children with ADHD. Like I said, it doesn't just impact you, it impacts a whole family. However, when you come in with that non-judgmental observer, like I talked about in this, and the we, it changes the mood, changes everything. It's calm, neutral. Wow. It can change everything, the whole aspect of a conversation. Then you meet them where they're at. Because you've done that investigation, you've met them, you've seen what's going on. You've been a detective, you've digged deeper, you know what's going on. And you meet them where they're at. Not where you think they're at, where they're at. If they're drinking, if they're doing all these things, yeah, that's not okay. But you've got to meet them there before you can move on. Then if you need to, do some ADHD education, right? We just did a bit today. Figure out what exactly is going on, how they're getting that interest, how they're taking that into the direction, and how it's igniting them, and it's autopilot. When you bring this ADHD education in, you're bringing in that inhibition, that break, because you're helping them to understand who they are. And also you need it for yourself, right? You need to understand them and they need to understand themselves to be able to work with it. Then expectations and agreements. Realistic, meeting them where they're at, right? You know, going from drinking every night to not drinking is a lot. Expectations, where they're at. Here we go, the approach. I've noticed this, meeting them where they're at and their emotions. You've got that ADHD thing. How can we help this? Do we need to learn about ADHD together to help with this? Expectations, what we expect, both of us, both parties, what we expect, coming up with agreements. Then coming for strategies for them, right? You've got this wiki here. They come up with strategies for them. Then you hope that they take that ownership. However, if this doesn't work, then there's that extra key of seeking help. And I want you to know that it's okay to seek help. This is not easy. Like I said, I wish I could give you a magical wand and it'd be easy, but it's not. And the realistic is that ADHD is so complex. But it's okay to ask for help. We all need it. I needed it. I needed it when I was 16, when I was 21, when I was 27, and still now. I'm an ADHD life coach, but I still have coaching myself because I still have ADHD. Challenges come up. However, I now take ownership. At 16, I didn't. These are the steps to help them take ownership. However, we do need to help them along the way. And as much as they don't like that, sometimes it's just finding the right approach to do it. The right approach for them. And if things like this don't help, seek help. Coach. Coach is about moving forward, a bit like this. Counseling is for more of the emotional, therapy or support groups for yourself. Because I want just to say, as parents or educators, this is not easy. And you need to make sure that you're getting support. And you're meeting yourself where you're at, right? This is for them, but it's also for you. Because you've got to be okay. This is hard. And I get that. But it can get easier. Trust me, from myself, from the clients I work with, it can get easier. How we approach it, the understanding is the key. So kids with ADHD need someone in their corner. Even if you don't have the answers, be that somebody. And if you're here today, you are that somebody. Because if you weren't that somebody, you wouldn't be there. And I just want to reiterate that they need someone in the corner. They might not always want it, but they do need that. We do need help. And if you can't be that, if it's too hard, if this is not working or things that you've tried, you're hitting a brick wall and it's going boom, 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 then go to that last one, seek help. It is okay to do that because we all need that to give our teens the best life that's possible for them. And I know that's why you're all here. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. I hope that you have something to go with. I hope that you've at least learned something or got something out of this. That's all I ever ask. So thank you.
Natasha, wow, thank you so much. I was just gripped the whole way through. The way you sort of explain and break things down, it's so accessible. We both know a lot about ADHD, but you can always learn more, and I've definitely found it really useful myself, and I hope that parents watching have had a deeper understanding, and most importantly feel like they have some starting points for where to go in supporting their teens. And I really do believe that understanding is really key to helping children. It's kind of the ethos of the way I work, and it sounds very much like that's your ethos too. That if we understand that, that's really is the key to bringing about positive changes. But I just wanted to reflect on some of the things that really struck me this evening with what you were saying in your talk. I loved that sense of thinking of the whole of adolescence as being a period of self-discovery, and that it's a journey, and if things seem bad, they're not necessarily going to always stay bad. One of the things that struck me was about you were talking about the effort that teenagers with ADHD, or any individual with ADHD, has to put in to kind of putting those brakes on. And I think that sense of effort and often the fatigue that comes along with working so hard at something at a cognitive level often gets missed or not fully recognised. So I think that was really, really important to highlight. I love, that sense of ADHD individuals. We're all unique, but it just doesn't define who we are. In terms of the neurodiversity itself being different for every individual, but that's just not who the whole person is. That I think when we are presented with really challenging behaviours, it really can be overwhelming as parents, and it can be quite easy to lose sight of that. So I sort of echo your comments of anyone watching this evening, and you're taking the right step, and you are in your child's corner, and that's all going to help make sure that the whole of them as a child is recognised and valued, and as you see them through those challenging years, because it is challenging, isn't it? Natasha, listen, thank you so much. You're a real inspiration. You're an inspiration for the young people who have ADHD, that they can see that you can achieve anything. It's having neurodiversity does not stop you achieving what you want to achieve. And for the parents that are watching, that I think it can be really reassuring to hear from you, from individuals, not just with your professional hats on, but bringing in your personal experience as well. I think it's reassuring, isn't it, to know that our children, even when we're going through really challenging times, that it doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be like that, and that help is out there. And so, that key message I think you gave at the end of seek help, knowing what to say and do is really hard. And I love the I, we, them sort of thought process, and I think it's a really nice way of thinking and approaching and trying to sort of remain calm and as you approach a situation. But it can be really hard to know what to say and do. And I would just say to anybody watching, if you thinking, this is something that I really like to try, but I just not quite confident or not quite sure what exactly would I say, should I say, get in touch with Natasha. Do you work, Natasha, just in person? Do you work online as well?
No, so I work online because guess what? We're all over the country, and I like to be accessible for as many people as possible. So I'm really big, because I work with international clients as well, so I'm really big on virtual.
There you go. Anybody wanting to reach out, hop on to Indigo Hub, find out a bit more about what Natasha, her services are and what her experience is. And I'm sure you've seen from this evening how approachable she is. And look, I think the young people and the families you're working with are very lucky. And just thank you so much for such a really interesting and useful talk this evening. I'm going to end now, everybody. So thank you. Don't forget, if you've got any questions you want to ask, pop them in the comments. I can already see we've had some people saying thank you, very interesting. Really took a lot away from it. Lots of eye-opening, thought-provoking information you've shared. So thank you very much, everybody, and see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.